The Alternative Blend is made possible through the generous underwriting support of the Green Solution.
Our next guests are husband and wife team turned patient caregiver, and they're here to tell us their story. I'd like to welcome Scott, Takeda, and Lori Allred. Did I get that right?
You did.
Yes.
Practice and practice.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so you two are independent filmmakers.
Yes.
And in fact, you've worked on a project to tell the very story we're about to tell.
Yes.
You've made a movie
Exactly,
about it,
yes.
which we'll talk about in a minute. But I'd like to just sort of start with, what was that moment that changed everything in your life that turned you from partners, husband, wife, into patient caregiver? What happened?
Well, beginning of 2016, I slipped on hardwood floors in our house and suffered a traumatic brain injury, and basically spent most of 2016 in bed.
Oh my goodness, just a simple fall in your house. It changed
Exactly.
everything. So what you were in bed for a year, what were the symptoms? What were you dealing with physically?
It was sensitivity to light, it was fogginess, memory issues, and
Exhaustion.
Exhaustion, yeah, just real severe exhaustion.
And then for you, Lori,
Yes.
all of a sudden the world changed for you too, clearly. You have a partner in life, and all of a sudden you have someone in bed for a year that you're taking care of, and everything was on you.
Yes. Yes.
But you told me before we started that patience and sense of humor was absolutely critical.
Yes, you have to just let things go, or maybe go for a walk, and then just find humor in some of the silliness of it.
I mean, one of the things that you told me you really dealt with is just, forgive me, but him just repeating himself.
Yes.
Over and over. And every time you have to act like it's new, or at some point you have to
so
say,
you don't hurt his feelings,
Right, I know. That has to be so
or,
hard.
Or him telling me something that I had just told him, like it was a new idea, and he was informing me. So yeah.
So
I just want to inform you something.
So a little bit like Alzheimer's, only so many more other things on top of that.
Sure.
Like you said, the fogginess and the sheer exhaustion. He wasn't functioning, he was in bed.
Right, but everyone who suffers a TBI has different symptoms. It affects everyone differently. So it's so hard to say what would happen to some are very, minor, and some, have a much more difficult time of it.
And you were telling me too, then the number of people who have traumatic brain injuries is, would you say it was like 10 times the amount of?
Yeah, if you
two times the number of cancer
according to the
patients.
Centers for Disease Control, 2.8 million people are diagnosed every year with, traumatic brain injuries. And if you were to take the 10 most commonly diagnosed cancers and combine them together, those are less than half the number of traumatic brain injuries.
That's incredible.
It happens, and people don't talk about it.
But that's the thing. You told me there's a stigma about it.
Yeah.
And I got to thinking about that after our discussion, because if I'm working, do I want people to know that maybe I have some issues going on in my brain in terms of functioning? Do I want to put that on a job application? Do I,
you don't.
all of those things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's very hidden. So it may be underreported.
Oh, yeah, because again, there's 2.8 million people who report this. So there's a whole bunch that maybe don't go to the hospital, or for any number of reasons. And it's so common, yet no one talks about it, which is part of the reason why we did this film.
Well, it's kind of interesting because you move from one stigma to another, because at some point in time, you decided to use cannabis, or at least try cannabis, to see if it would help you with your symptoms. How were you introduced to it? How did that happen?
Lori was seeing something online, and she thought that this would be something that would help. I thought, nothing else seems to be working for me. So we went to go see a specialist. He recommended that we try medical cannabis. I got my medical card, I got the little tincture, and 30 days later I still hadn't tried it, because, I grew up with the Nancy Reagan just say no era. And,
So did I.
It's like, she said to say no. And
it just wasn't a part of your culture,
Nancy
right?
would be disappointed.
yes, I know.
I couldn't disappoint Nancy.
Yeah, no.
So, but at some point in time, maybe the encouragement of Lori, at some point in time you said, okay, nothing else is working, let me try.
Yeah.
And so you did.
Yeah.
And then what happened, Lori? You said the very first day.
Yeah, the very first day, the repeating himself had minimized. He seemed a little more clear-headed, which there are so many things that, we were learning about cannabis as we went. We had no idea, but we found out even a friend of ours who has ADHD takes it to help him focus.
Yeah.
which we're like, what?
And you didn't know.
We had
See,
no
isn't it
idea.
funny? Isn't it funny when you
Yeah.
start saying, and I've learned this from others who are starting to like use it for something medically or for their health, when they start talking about it, they start learning like their sister, their
I
cousin,
know.
their neighbor.
It's shocking.
And that's happened to
You
you.
feel like you're the only one who doesn't know. You're like,
Right.
well, how come no one told me?
right.
And I think that's part of what we've done this film is no one talks about TBIs, no one talks about medical cannabis, and yet when you bring it up in conversation, everyone goes, "Oh my gosh,
yeah.
my cousin," or "that happened to me," or something like that. So it's like
Right.
it's there under the surface. It's just that no one is talking about it, and because of that, there's this shame and stigma associated to both TBIs and medical cannabis.
And so your film tells your story. Tell me a little bit about your film.
So we're really hoping our film is that conversation starter, the one that we probably should have had earlier, to help us understand that this was an option, that this could really help. So the film addresses the stigma of someone with a traumatic brain injury, and then the stigma of how they opted to treat it, which was eventually with medical cannabis.
But it's your story.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is your story. And when does your film come out?
We are just now starting to enter it into film festivals, so we haven't heard back yet. So we are hoping for a very quick premiere, hopefully this summer, this fall, who knows?
Summer, fall,
And the
yes,
name of it
sometime.
is?
Remembering Us.
Remembering Us. What a great name. I did happen to see a couple of clips of it, and if you don't mind, I'm going to show one now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly.
My name's Kate Novak. My husband Steve was brought in earlier. He suffered what appears to be a moderate traumatic brain injury, a concussion.
A brain what?
We've been performing serial neurologic exams, and he seems to be worsening a bit. We're concerned enough to do a CT scan to evaluate for a bleed.
A bleed? Please. What are we looking at?
Everyone knows!
That's what I want to know, Steve.
Traumatic brain injuries vary from patient to patient, but it could be anything from headaches to fogginess to memory loss.
Marijuana, you better work.
Or he may have a new normal.
Okay, wow. That looks like a very powerful film.
It's a little intense.
A little intense, but with a great ending.
It was more intense to go through it, actually.
Well, he makes a good point. You know, one of the things you also shared with me that I thought was so wonderful, Lori, is that you clearly, I've talked with you before the show, and you have such a great sense of humor. And you said that
I'm
really,
very funny.
You are very funny. You need to be writing comedy. I'm telling you, you just need to do it. But you told me that before the use of cannabis, before the brain trauma, he didn't so much get your humor.
Not at all. Like I explained every joke, which of course
Forget it.
loses it, right?
Of course.
You're like, really?
Buzzkill.
Never mind.
Buzzkill. Yeah. And then what happened? Now all of a sudden it's different?
Now he thinks well, go ahead. Say the words.
She wants me to say that I think she's funny.
And isn't she?
Yes.
I'm funnier now than I used to be.
You know what I thought he was going to say? I don't remember.
That'd have been good.
You missed your line.
That
You
was
missed your
good.
line.
I missed. Yeah, you set me up there.
So you guys got about a minute left. Is there advice you would give someone either about the brain trauma and the injury and all of that you went through, and or the use of cannabis, either one of those things, any advice you'd give others? Because we have an audience that's kind of following along with me. I've never used cannabis like you guys, right?
Oh, yeah.
I just say no, and I think it's bad, but it's been so criminalized and delegitimized that it's not my culture. Mm-hmm. But the more I hear about it, the more I'm intrigued and very curious about it, and I hear these stories like yours, and you've gone through the same thing, and this audience is going through it with us.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would you say to an audience who's hesitant about this? You in particular, who waited 30 days after you had your prescription.
Yeah, I would just say that, for the most part, as far as if you're going through a TBI or if you're using medical cannabis, you're not alone. And that it is actually very common. And
just not talked about.
Just not talked about. It's just so I think as storytellers, it's our job to shine a light on things and to show that this is, affects people.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. And Lori, you have any?
Well, I would say if you're willing to take a prescription from a doctor for a narcotic that you know nothing about, why would you not consider cannabis when there's so much information out there that you can learn about.
That's such a great point. That's such a great point. For the two of you, if anybody wanted to know more about your business or wanted to reach you, is there some place we can send them?
Yes, we have a Facebook fan page, Remembering Us Film, so they can certainly follow along. We're updating this sometimes every week. And then our filmmaking company is BSFilmworks.
BSFilmworks.com. Well, I appreciate both of you coming on to share your story.
Appreciate
and
that.
your
Thank
movie,
you.
honestly, truly, it looks incredible. And what great actors you've found to be a
We
part
sure
of this.
did,
You
yes.
sure did. Well, I wish you the best of luck and
Thank
continued
you.
good health. And
Appreciate that.
come back and let us know how that film does.
Yes, we
Thank
will.
you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Scott
you,
and
thank you,
Lori.
thank
Thank you
you,
so
thank
much.
The Alternative Blend is made possible through the generous underwriting support of the Green Solution.